Hey everyone, Gary Simon of Coursetro. And what do we have here? We have version 4.0.0. We're out of alpha, we're out of beta, and just 4 days ago, on the 18th of January, they released the official version after quite a long time, several years in development. This Bootstrap 4 was in. So I already did a Bootstrap 4 course last year and it's free, but that was when it was alpha. So a lot of stuff has changed since then. So I decided I would do a real quick sort of elongated tutorial / crash course on the basics of getting up and running and using Bootstrap 4 to build a layout, which is exactly what we are going to do. So just a preface, before we begin, there's a complete written version of this tutorial at my website, coursetro.com. It's linked in the description, like the first line of the description here on YouTube. And this is just for your reference. There's going to be code here. Everything I do is going to follow the flow of this written tutorial here in this video tutorial that you're about to watch. All right. So to get started, we are going to cover integration or you're integrating your Bootstrap 4. All right, so there's a couple ways. There's a really quick way, and then there's a not so quick way, and each has their drawbacks. So if we want to get started as fast as humanly possible, then if you visit getbootstrap.com in the docs and we go to introduction, we scroll down just a little bit, you'll see this starter template section right here. Oh, but real quick, before we begin, make sure you check out my site, coursetro.com, where you're going to find a bunch of courses on modern design and development. A lot are free, and the others you can access for the cost of buying me like a 6-pack each month. That's it. Now, also, it probably wouldn't hurt to subscribe here on YouTube, and be sure to make sure the notifications are turned on. All right, let's get back to it. All you have to do, literally, to get started is just copy this, go to your code editor, paste this in, save this as an HTML file, which it's not yet. That's why it's not formatting any type of colors. And there you go, you get started. It includes primarily 3 different things. All right, so actually I should say 4. And that is the Bootstrap CSS right here. This, if you visit this, and this is through a CDN in the browser, you copy and paste that, you'll see this massive minified version of Bootstrap. It's going to be massive, but it includes everything that you would want to use. And then down here, you have your required JavaScript, okay? That's all you really need to get up and running with Bootstrap. However, the downside to this, of course, is the fact that you don't have any Sass pre-compiling, or pre-processing rather. And also you're including the kitchen sink essentially. So you can't choose which elements you want. And so that means it's going to be large. This is ideal for prototyping, quick projects, something like that. So we're not going to use that method. We're going to use the more robust method where you can customize a lot more things. You have the power of Sass, and we'll do that by installing Bootstrap 4 via the Node package manager. So this means that you're going to need nodejs installed, and to check, go to your console or command line, node-v, and you can see I have a version. If you don't, go to nodejs.org, download the appropriate installer based on your operating system, install it with the default settings, then reload your console or command line, and then you can have access to Node and npm, which is the Node package manager. All right, so once you have that, let's go ahead, make a directory. We're going to call this BS for Bootstrap, not the other BS, 4. And after it creates it, we're going to cd into BS4. Okay, so now we're going to use the npm init command to create a package JSON file, which simply stores our project dependencies. So npm init, I'm going to add the Y flag here, and that's just going to give us all the default answers. Otherwise, if you omit that, it's going to ask you all these question prompts and such. We don't need that. All right, so now we're going to use npm once again to install several different packages as development dependencies. So npm install. Now, instead of just putting install, we can just use same thing. All right, so gulp, that's one of the things we're going to install. That's a JavaScript task runner. Browser sync, gulp Sass, and then save it as a development dependency, all 3 of those packages. All right, so as this installs right here, Again, I'm going to reiterate what those three packages are. So Gulp is a JavaScript task runner, and you're going to see how that works shortly if you're new to it. Browser Sync automatically refreshes our browser for us upon file changes, which is really handy when you're in the process of developing a layout. And then Gulp Sass enables Sass compiling with our project. And if you don't know what Sass is, I really recommend, because I'm not going to be covering basics of Sass here, but I really recommend doing a search for a tutorial or a course or something on that. Okay, so I'm just going to pause this until, oh wait, there it goes. It's already finished. Okay, and we're going to use npm one final time to install a few regular project dependencies. So those first three that we created, they're only needed for development purposes, but these three are going to be needed for actually production purposes. So npm I for install, Bootstrap, obviously we want that. We want jQuery and popper.js, and we're just going to save without the save dev flag. So of course, we know what Bootstrap is. That's why you're here. jQuery is used by Bootstrap, and then popper.js is also used by Bootstrap, and it allows for positioning of popovers and tooltips. They used to use tether in the alpha version, so that's one of the things that they changed. All right, so next, if you're using Visual Studio Code, like I am and most others are who create these tutorials, then you can just simply type code and a period, and that will launch our Visual Studio Code editor here for us automatically. So I'm going to position this real quickly. Yep, all right. And now we're going to create the following folders here. So it's pretty typical to create like a source folder, so src, and then inside of there, we're going to create a few other folders. So another one will be like assets. Another one will be CSS. Another one will be JS for JavaScript if we want that. And then SCSS for Sass. Okay, so inside of our source folder, which we're currently in, let's create an index.html file. All right, now we're going to paste the following contents. I'm not going to sit here and just type it all out. I'm going to make our life a little bit easier, but just to show you what's happening here in the pertinent areas is we just have some real quick basic HTML happening. We have right here fonts. I'm using a Railway font. Very easy to include this from the Google Web Fonts. I'm using Font Awesome for Font Awesome icons. I just realized our particular layout throughout this little crash course, I don't think I actually use this, so we could probably omit that, but it's nice to have if you want icons, or a bunch of them at least. And then also we have our main Bootstrap CSS, and this gets compiled, or we use Sass to create this file with Gulp, and you'll see how that works shortly. And then also a custom styles CSS that gets included after our Bootstrap, right? And then finally down here, we have those three JavaScript files that we need. Okay. So let's go ahead and save that. And next, just before we get to the Gulp section, we're going to hop right into our SCSS Sass folder, and we're going to create a styles.scss file. So styles.scss is where our custom SCSS is going to go. So I'm going to put in BG color. This is a variable. We'll just call it red, and then body background we'll set to BG color. Now the reason I'm doing this is, we're not going to use this, but I wanted to make sure right when we're done with this, the Gulp process, that it is actually, taking our Sass and converting it to regular CSS, just kind of like a test. All right. So now we're going to create, and this is the final process, by the way, of this integration process. We're going to create a gulp file.js, and we need to name it gulp file.js. And I'm going to paste this in series. And again, all this stuff is at that written tutorial, just for your reference. I'm going to hit Control B to get rid of this sidebar. We can see things a little bit better, and hit Control Plus so we can see things easier. So the first thing we're doing, we're creating variables, and we're importing the three packages that we're going to need. So Gulp, Browser Sync, and Gulp Sass. All right. Next, we're going to create, let's see here. We're going to start kind of at the end of this file. just so I can explain it a little better. Any gulp task that's named as default just means we can type in gulp in the command line. When we do that and hit enter, it's going to run whatever we specify here. So it's going to run two tasks called JS for JavaScript and serve. All right, so the serve task, I'm going to paste right here. All right, so the task here is named serve. This is what this is in relation to. And this is also going to pass in sass, which is a task that we haven't yet defined. We will. And all this does here, this task is just launch a localhost 3000 on port 3000, a server, and then it's going to watch these files right here. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And that's in the node modules, Bootstrap, SCSS, bootstrap.scss file here. It's going to watch that, and as well as source, SCSS, and any file inside of this folder right here. It's going to watch these, okay? And then it's going to gulp watch any HTML file. Right now, we're only going to be working with index.html throughout this whole thing. And it will reload it on change, or if we save it. That's all that means. All right, so let's also get our JavaScript task here. All right, so what's happening here? All right, so basically we're returning this file right here, and you can navigate to that file if you want to in the node modules, and as well as jQuery, and as well as this popper.min.js file. It's taking those from the node modules folder and it's placing them into the source JS folder that we created. All right, and then we have two more. Let's do our sass right here, and basically, as the comment suggests, it takes our sass, compile sass into CSS, and auto inject it into the browser. So it's looking at gulp source, it's looking for the Bootstrap sass file, and also any of our custom sass files like our styles.scss, and it's using the pipe method. It's going to run sass on it, sass pre-compiling, and then it's going to take that compiled regular CSS and put it into source CSS under the same names right here, and then this will reload the browser. All right, actually, let's see. Yeah, that was all it was. I thought there was another task, but there's not. Sweet. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. And let's go ahead, if everything is set up correctly, then once we run gulp, then a browser will load up on localhost 3000, and it should have a red background, and it better. Let's see. Oh, sweet. It worked. All right, cool. So I'm going to get this positioned in here. Okay, awesome, 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 awesome. So real quickly, just so I don't forget, let's go ahead and we'll go back to the here. Let's go back to styles. Got that out there. We don't need that. And so, by the way, if I go back to here, we could see it automatically reloads, which is the power of browser sync. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to focus on the very first thing that I think would be most relevant. So the starting point of your Bootstrap 4 project is almost always going to revolve around, let's go ahead and in our index.html file, it's going to revolve around the grid container. So the container class, a class of container, allows you to horizontally center your layout. All right, so we define one right here. We'll say div class equals container, and we'll put test. All right, so if I save this, all right, we'll see we have test here, but what does that even mean? Let's hit Control-Shift-I just here on Chrome to get out the inspector, and then I'm going to click on this little selector, and we're going to click right or hover around right here. You can see that our container is just a fixed width sort of container for our content. All right, so in the case or the scenario in which you wanted 100% fluid layout, you would use, instead of the container class, you would use container-fluid right here. Okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to have a fixed width. All right, so the next element outside of this would be the nav bar, which is pretty typical. I mean, you defined your container. Now you want to have a navigation of some sort, maybe your logo and the the different navigation items on your header portion. So one very important thing about this very quick crash course is the fact that I'm not going to be covering every single element in the documentation. It would just take far too long. Just to show you just how vast Bootstrap 4 is. I mean, you can look through all of these. There's a lot of different things you can do, but my goal with this crash course is going to be reverting back and forth with this documentation just to show you how it works. That way you can have more power going forward, understanding how to use all these things yourself based on the few that we do use. So the nav bar is going to be one that we use right here. And the way the document by and large, the documentation by and large is set up is you have all your different sections here, and then on the right hand side you have all these different sections here, and they're just quick links where you can get to different parts of this page. And the different parts of this page, they pretty much show you an example of what the HTML and the classes are doing here. And they also describe what's happening. So it's a really thorough documentation. So that's great. So for the nav bar, we're going to say most header navigations, they include a company logo. So we're going to go with what is most typical, and it's usually left aligned. And we're also going to include a navigation that's right aligned inside of that same area. So to do this, let's get rid of test here. What we'll do is we're going to start with a nav class of navbar, navbar expand, large, navbar dark, and BG primary. Okay, you're probably wondering, where the hell did I get all those classes? What do they mean? Well, in the navbar documentation, it'll show you the kitchen sink example right here. I mean, this is going to show you the full thing in terms of what it's capable of producing. And this is the example that they show. If you go down beyond that, it's going to start at the absolute bare bones basics, like navbar, which is the class that we just created, navbar light and BG light, all that stuff. So this is where you're going to find information on those specific classes that we just used. So you always start for a navbar, you use the nav element with a navbar class, and then for instance, this right here, navbar dark, is for color, and this is for a background color. And so let's continue on. If we want a logo, it's an A class of navbar brand, href, it's not going anywhere, company name. All right, so again, if I saved this, we're not going to see too much happening. We see this, that's all we see. That's not exactly what we want yet, although we do want our logo. Here it is. Sweet. Okay, so next after that, to actually define a navigation where there's menu items, we're going to put a div class, and we'll put, a collapse class as well as navbar collapse. All right, and this is important. This stuff is important here for responsive navigation. So ID equals navbar supported content. You'll see how this works shortly. And then we're going to put in, not that, we're going to put in a UL class for unordered list of navbar nav. And then I'm also going to add ML-auto. So it's margin left auto. That's what pushes it over to the very right. In the documentation examples, they have MR auto, and that means you're actually, I'll just describe it. I'll show you real quickly what that does instead of just sitting here talking. But it's all about alignment essentially. So to create an individual list item, we give it a nav item class, and then we put a class of nav link. We'll put in href2, and then finally home. So let's copy this. We'll paste it a couple times. I hate how that happens. And we'll do this. So we're going to have a total of 4. I'm just going to shift and tab to get that spacing correct. Out, or about rather, and then products, and then contact. So let's save this real quick and see what it looks like. Oh, great. Awesome. Looks horrible. Let's see what happened. Okay, and I realize that's not showing up simply because this right here should not end until after this div right here. So sorry about that. Put nav there, and you had better show up. What is going? Oh, there we go. Sorry, I was freaking out for a second. It's just because we are on a smaller viewport. This is when a little toggle button is going to show up momentarily when we do that markup. But there we go. We have our home, about, products, and contact showing up real nice and neat right there. Awesome. Okay, so now what's the let it takes, for instance, to add a drop down? Once again, all of that stuff will be found in the documentation that I just showed you a little bit ago for navbar. But just to show you real quickly what the drop down, or how to do a drop down, we change, let's say we want our products to be a drop down. So the first thing we do is we take nav item, we add a drop down class, all right? And then we put in a class of nav link, and then we put drop down toggle. So we add those two classes of drop down and then drop down toggle on the actual link. We have to give this an ID as well. So I'm going to shrink this a little bit. ID is going to be navbar drop down. All right, and then data hyphen toggle, and then we're going to put drop down. All right, so then outside of the actual A, but still inside of our list item, we're going to put in a div with a class of drop down menu. And then inside of here, we're going to put individual anchors. So we're going to put drop down item for the class, href, that's not going anywhere because we don't have other pages, product 1. Now, if you're using Visual Studio Code, you can Shift Alt and the down arrow key just a few times. And if you want to put a separator, you can do that too. This is all from the documentation. So drop down divider. Okay, so now we can go ahead and save this, and hopefully there are no more hiccups. And we'll see we have this little drop down, and there we go. Voila, awesome stuff. Okay, so how do we actually make the this little hamburger section show up and make it function here in Bootstrap 4? All right, well, very simple. We're just going to come up here to the top, just underneath our A here, and we're going to put in the following markup. And then this is going to be a button. And this, by default, gets hidden on large viewports because this is only supposed to show on smaller ones. So this is going to be navbar toggle for the class, type equals button, data toggle is going to equal collapse, and then data target is going to be equal to the ID of navbar supported content right here. So we just copy that, and we'll put a number sign here. All right, and that's it for that. And then inside of the button, we put a span class of navbar toggler icon, and you could put something custom there if you wanted to, but that takes care of the appearance of the actual button. So if we save this, of course we can see it's showing up as it shouldn't, but if we save it, there we have it showing up, and then I have to figure out why that's showing up right here. And that's simply because this is supposed to be toggler. Sorry about that. Boy, I don't usually make that many mistakes. All right, now it looks better. Look at that, awesome. And of course it's responsive. Okay, all right, so let's talk about, okay, what would be another common section that would fall underneath kind of like navigation here? Well, usually a hero section, and when it comes to Bootstrap 4, it's called a jumbotron, okay? Makes it sound more exciting, I guess. And so, again, you know, they have a jumbotron section. It's considered a component. So if you look at the documentation here, you're going to find everything you want to about the jumbotron. We're going to use it real quickly. So let's come up underneath our nav, our closing nav tag right there. So div class equals jumbotron. Very simple. We're going to have a h1 with a class of display 4, and then simple, elegant, awesome. Okay. And then let's put in a paragraph. Usually there's like a small subheading. So in that case, you use p class equals lead. You can find all of that in the topography section of the documentation. I'm just going to use some lorem ipsum text right here. So I'm just going to paste this in. If you want to find that, you can go to lipsum.com, lipsum.com. After that, we can also have, let's see here. And again, you can add whatever you want in this section. I mean, it's not something where you're constrained to whatever the documentation shows. We're going to add another lead section with a call to action button. So class equals btn. Of course, this is all coming from Bootstrap. You can find this in the button section, btn primary and btn large, LG rather. Going nowhere. The role is a button, and then we can put in learn more. All right, so let's save that and see now what our layout looks like. See, looks pretty good at this point. Okay, sweet. All right, so let's also talk about one of the most important aspects when it comes to Bootstrap 4 and understanding what's going on, and that is the grid system. So it's based on Flexbox, and if you're wondering, no, the grid system in Bootstrap 4 is not based on the new CSS grid, unfortunately. Now, Bootstrap 4 was developed for years and years, and they were already dedicated to Flexbox, and so many other components in their system relies on structure with Flexbox that it would take them forever to readapt it to the CSS grid. But Flexbox, at this point at least of recording, it is a safer bet usually because the CSS grid is supported at the time of recording this around 76% of browsers, and Flexbox is almost at 100%. So you can go to caniuse.com to find out what it currently is at. So the grid documentation for Flexbox, for the grid system rather, is very detailed. So if you look at it real quick, you can see all of these sections. Look at all this. Yeah, there's a lot to take in. Of course, I am not going to be covering everything, but I will show you and try to demonstrate the core aspects and fundamentals of how it all works. So let's say, for instance, that we want to have underneath this section right here, right around here, 3 columns of equal width where we have content in each one of them. Like they could be features associated with this service, whatever. All right, so to do that, just underneath our Jumbotron, we're going to start off with a div class of row. So when it comes to Bootstrap 4 classes, the row class is probably one that you're going to be using most often. All right, so it defines a actual row, like a horizontal row. And then when you want columns inside of those rows, you use div class and call. All right, now of course you can use a lot of other helpers. We'll get to that momentarily, but you use call if you just want to be able to have like equal width columns, right? So I'm just going to put in 1, and this is temporary, 2, and 3, and then I have to fix this, of course, because I don't know why. Maybe somebody can chime in, like, why does it do that? So annoying. So if I save this and we go back to our project, we can see our 3 columns, kind of. We have our 1, our 2, and our 3. And in terms of responsiveness, we drag this thing in, they stay right here. I'm going to show you how to make that responsive momentarily. Now, this just looks stupid, obviously. So we're going to have cards in here, and a card is something that you can find in a documentation. It's a component, and you'll see what it looks like in a second. So let's just have a div class of card, and sorry, it didn't close automatically. And inside of it, we're going to have div class equals card body, text center. All right, and we're going to have an h5 class of card title. Again, this is all coming from the card component documentation section. So we're going to have our card title here, and then we're going to have a description, card text, and then some quick text to build up on the card title. And then finally a button of some sort. So ahref going nowhere and class equals card link, because this is a link, so another link. All right. So now if I save this and we see it right here, this is a card. So it's just like a panel. It has padding in there already built into it. We use text center to center everything. And it has this little faint border, and it also has a corner radius. That's all a card is. So let's just copy this, that whole card section, paste it. There we go, being annoying. All right. And then the same thing right here. All right. So now it should look like this. Looks pretty good in my opinion. But that doesn't look good. So let's go ahead and figure out, okay, how can we create custom sizing? What if we don't want equal width for all these? What if we want this one to extend further beyond? Well, very simple. The grid system is based on 12 columns, so we could add a hyphen like that and 1 through 12. So let's add 6. So now the middle card here is going to take up, or the column rather, 6 actual rows. And these ones will automatically adapt to fit that. Pretty awesome. All right, so we don't want that though. We're going to go ahead and remove this. All right, and now let's focus on being responsive. So right now you collapse this. Nobody wants to read text like that on a phone, right? So how do we fix that? All right, very simple. Let's go ahead and we'll focus on the first one. So we're right up here where it says call. We're gonna change this. So we're gonna say call hyphen small sm 12. So what that means, let me just save that real quick and I'm gonna show you what happens. Right now, as you can see, this first one that we applied that class to, or those classes to, was it's assuming all 12 columns, and that's true on all the viewports because we specified it at small, right? SM small. So if you don't specify a different size for sizes above that, like on medium or large, then it's just going to assume whatever is at the mobile viewport. So let's go ahead and add call for medium and up. It's going to assume just 4 columns because 12 times, or divided by 4, or 3, which are 3 columns here, is 4. So let's go back. Ta-da! So notice we're going from, this is medium and larger. So it's assuming 4, and then at small it assumes 12, all 12 of them. So that's how that works. Very, very easy. We're going to leave it like that too. We'll say, for instance, that this is a really important one, and on mobile devices we want to, we'll give it precedence. Okay, and then these down here, these aren't actually hard to read. They look pretty good at this viewport. If you wanted them all to have the same behavior, you would simply copy and paste those classes that we just added on the first column. So let's also talk right now, because it's relevant, about margins and padding here in Bootstrap 4. Look how these are just sitting on top of each other. Looks like garbage, doesn't it? Well, we can fix that through adding the margin and paddings system in Bootstrap 4, which is actually pretty cool the way they've set it up. So let me show you real quickly. This is spacing. So this is under the spacing section. It's going to show you how you would set this up in terms of classes. So you first start off the class if you want margin, which applies to outside of a element that you're applying it to, you use M. And then if you want to apply padding, you use P, which is opposite. So that would be inside of an element to add spacing. And then after that, you put either T for top or padding top, B for bottom, left, right. X would be on both left and right. Y would be on top and bottom to add margin or padding. And then blank, and for classes that set margin and padding on all 4 sides of the element. And then after that, on the final step, you put a hyphen and then a size, 0 through 5, okay? So let's go ahead and try that real quickly. So we would add on our first card container, which is right here, we could add margin because we want it to be outside of it, bottom, and we'll use 4. So now, if we drag this in, we have our space. Awesome. All right, so let's also talk about working with type here in Bootstrap 4. So I want to add a section underneath our cards here that demonstrates just some type, and it's going to be 2 columns. And let's define those right now using what we've learned so far. So this will come just after this tag right here. This closing div is for the container. We want everything to be inside of that. So we're going to put in div class equals row, and we're going to add some margin here because what I found when I was doing this before recording, there was margin issues. Some of the sections in terms of the cards on top of it and the section we're about to add, there wasn't enough margin. So I'm going to put margin top. On small, we'll say 4, and then margin top on medium, 0. So those are classes that you can use, and again, you can find those all in the documentation for spacing and all that. And then so we're going to put in here div class equals a column. Okay, so on small devices we want it to go 12, and then on medium devices we want it to be 8, medium and up rather. Right, so that'll be 1 column. Let me just go ahead and copy this, and this is going to be our second column here. And this is going to be we're going to leave that here, and then we're going to change this to 4, not 3, to equal 8, or 12 rather, sorry about that. And so inside of here, we're going to add just some general type. So H3, an important heading, and then underneath that, we're going to put a P class of lead. And this means basically it's a subheading. It's a little bit larger than regular paragraph text, and it's also by default light gray, I believe. So I'm just gonna paste in what I have from the written tutorial. All right, and then we're just going to have 2 paragraphs of text just to illustrate what they look like, and they're all lorem ipsum right here, right there, like that. All right, so right here, I'm just going to put SAFDF. We'll go ahead and remove that momentarily. So this is what the type looks like here. And so Bootstrap 4 has a typography section, and it's going to tell you all the relevant stuff that you want to know about type issues and stuff. It also has a section for utilities and helper classes right here. And that's going to give you the classes that you need for text alignment, like if you want to center your text, left, right, and it's also responsive. So if you only want it like text to be centered or on small devices, then you would add this. So all very handy stuff that I'm not going to cover, but just to let you know about its existence. All right, so let's go ahead and come back here. So we have this section here. And let's go ahead. Oh, and one thing I wanted to demonstrate, let's take a look at this here on the smaller viewports. Let's say, for instance, on the smaller viewports, we wanted this to be centered. How will we do that? All right, well, again, I was just showing you those helper classes. So right here for this column, we would add text, small, center, and then on medium and larger, we want it to be left. All right, so we go back, and if I can find it, there we go. It's centered, and then it's left. Very, very easy stuff. So let's as one final element that I'm going to show you before we get into customization of all this stuff, let's go ahead and have a vertical navigation. That's another common thing that you may want. So inside of that column, which is this text, let's add in a H3, and we're going to say margin bottom 4. That's something I discovered I needed to add. Secondary menu for the title, and then our actual menu here, or our navigation. So for a vertical navigation, we add UL class of a nav. and it's going to be a flex column, and we're going to have nav pills. So you can look up all that stuff in the documentation for the nav section, which is a component in the documentation. And like I'll show you actually what it looks like without nav pills. It's just a different way to kind of style it. So then we have a list items, nav items. This is similar to the navigation we already defined up top. A class equals nav link. We can add active just to show what that looks like. href going nowhere. And then we'll say active. Let's just copy this. And then for this, let's remove that. We'll just put link. And this is coming pretty much from the documentation. Very simple stuff. Wow, I hate doing that. And then we'll have, we'll have one more. We'll just say this is what it looks like to be disabled. Simply add disabled, and that's that. So if we save this and go back, this is our menu. All right, cool stuff. So the pills, like if we remove that, I wanted to demonstrate real quickly. We go back, we could see that's all it is. The pills is just give you a background color based on what's active. So yeah, we'll leave it. Okay, so by the way, of course, this is responsive. We can check it out down here. There we go. Awesome. All right, so I think I've demonstrated enough in terms of how to use the documentation for adding elements based on your needs. Okay, so now let's talk about customization in Bootstrap 4, because right now this is cookie cutter. It's pretty standard, and you're probably going to want to customize the look of this. All right, so we do all that in the styles sass or the SCSS file that we created. So let's go back to that real quick right here. And initially we put the variable overrides right here at the very top. And then we want to import Bootstrap sass files. Okay, so the way we do that is through import. We'll say node modules, Bootstrap, SCSS, and Bootstrap. All right, so this will include absolutely everything, all the imports. And if according to the theming section, which if I bring up right over here in the documentation, there's two ways to go about this. And let's come down here. Yeah, so this is the first method that we just did, and that includes everything. And then you can just include only what you need. And if you include only what you need, then these three imports are required. And then these are optional. So if you want to make custom adjustments to say just the grid, then you would import just the grid right here. All right, so hopefully you understand it, but to make it simple, we're just going to import everything. So now let's talk about probably the most common desire here. We want to change the theme color here in Bootstrap 4 for our layout. So we don't want that blue because everybody's probably using that blue, especially the newbies. So to get an idea of what you can control, like which variables, we're going to go to the node modules Bootstrap folder. All right, Gary, where is it at? There we go. And we're going to go into our SCSS folder, and we're going to look at variables.scss. All right, so looking at this is a huge file, by the way. It's all separated into different sections. So the first section is at the top, fortunately, called color system. So we have all of these variables here, and say for instance we wanted to change some of the theme colors. Well, all the theme colors are defined right here under the theme colors map. All right, so we have primary, secondary, success. So we can see that primary is just another variable, primary, but if we go up and find primary, okay, geez, it's another it's another variable. But if we go up and find blue, well, that is the actual blue that's currently on the website. And I'll just, I'll go back real quick. That's that blue right here. So what if you wanted to change that? Very simple. We'll come here. We'll just re-reference theme colors. and we put in parentheses, and we're going to say primary is now going to become, I don't know, D95700. Okay, so let's go ahead and put a semicolon at the end and save that. So now what's going to happen? Sweet, it becomes this fiery orange type of color. Very, very simple. So if you wanted to change more of the default colors based on whatever components that you have here, then again, you just go back to the variables, you see what you can change for secondary, success, info, warning, danger, light, dark, blah, blah, blah. And you specify your custom adjustments right here in your styles, and you just put a comma right there and add them. Very simple. Let's say, for instance, we want to change the background color. Well, if you just study up enough, we can find it. I know it's here somewhere. Body. So the body BG is by default white, and we also have a body color here. So let's go ahead and take that, and let's say we want to change our body background color from white. Let's say to like a light gray. So that happens to be, let's see here, ED, ED, ED. And by the way, just to show you, here in Visual Studio Code, if you hover over this little section, you can change the color with a color picker like that. So now if we save this and go back, we'll see now we have our gray background, very light gray background. But this looks like crap though, right? Because this is also gray. It's actually a shade off or whatever for our Jumbotron background. And so you can also make custom adjustments. And so if you wanted to change something specific that you can't figure out how to do with variables, or maybe there's no variables for it, if we Control-Shift-I and we click on the element that we want to change. All right, we see that it says div class Jumbotron, and it has a current background color. If you want to experiment right here in the browser, you can do that by clicking this, and we'll make it white, for instance. I like that. I think it looks a lot better. So we'll just change that div class of Jumbotron, and if it's already defined, you may have to use the important flag. So it's called Jumbotron, and then inside of here, background color and important. Let's also add like a, I guess you'd say like a shadow at the top. It makes it look like the nav bar has a shadow, just something very, very, very slight. So we'll say border top, 3 pixels solid, RGB, 219, 219, 219. And the only reason I'm using that is because that's what, when you change stuff here, it uses RGB here. So if we save it now, it's going to be white as it refreshes. And now we can see, if I get rid of this, we have that very slight, I'm not even sure if you can see it, custom adjustment that we have here. So now, awesome. All right, so hopefully that was a decent enough crash course for you to really start getting your feet wet. You've learned how to integrate it in terms of just being really quick and just using the whole kitchen sink with a CDN, but also using it in a more robust development environment that enables SaaS. And then also learning how to use this documentation, which, it's huge. If there were a proper course done with this, it would be hours upon hours to try to cover every single type of element, which I think is unnecessary. All you need to understand is how to read that Bootstrap 4 documentation here. And they made it very simple. It's not complex. And I think going forward, if you watch through this whole thing, you should be able to achieve almost anything you want in terms of Bootstrap for theming and creating layouts, essentially. All right, so make sure you check out my site, coursetro.com. And also, of course, as always, if you liked it, subscribe here. I'm going to be having a ton more content, at least every couple, maybe 2 to 3 or 4 days for sure, here on YouTube and on the site. I'll see you guys later.